All right. First rule of this channel, we do not talk about this channel. Second rule of the channel, this is not legal advice. So welcome to After Waivers Week 12. Right now, this is what we're looking at going forward. Has to do with picking up that second defense. So we have one to stream and one that we have our set and forget. We want to make sure that we know our lineup and our opponent's lineup looking forward to the playoffs. Knowing, do I have guys that are either matchup dependent guys or there's just set and forget guys for my lineup? That's kind of what I'm looking at going forward. The name of the game at this point is all about predictability. Do I have a guy that I feel like I don't know what output I'm going to get from a week to week basis, or do I have a guy that I feel like if I put him in my lineup, I know I can get that 40-degree day or better. So yesterday I did the Chasing the Dragon video on the reactive waiver wire pickups, guys like Zach Charbonnet. If you're interested in that stuff, I would go look at that video. I don't know how much I will or will not be talking about my thoughts in this video when it comes to that stuff. Week 12, there are no buys. Week 13, you have the Bills, the Bears, the Raiders, the Vikings, the Giants, and the Ravens. There are still guys having buys. Week 14, I know the Cardinals have buys. I think there's at least one other team. I just don't remember what it is off the top of my head. Anyway, we're moving on. Hopefully I can keep this relatively short. I don't know how many leagues still have trades open. I know I've seen that some trades will trade, or some leagues will trade all the way up till the chip. So if that's what your league does, I'll still try and keep that in there. I know there's a lot of people that are interested in their dynasty stuff because that stuff goes year round as opposed to redraft, which is basically done until the draft hits again. So anyway, with the 49ers, there's not a lot to say about them that we didn't already know. Brock Purdy can win you your league. Very safe floor with just enough upside to go toe to toe with anybody. I could definitely see him being, well, he should be a top 10 pick next year when it comes to the quarterback position. I don't know how high he'll actually move up that rankings because there's going to be everybody chasing after those rushing floor guys. But he does have a little nimbly in it. CMC's elite. Elijah Mitchell's the cuff. If you haven't cuffed CMC at this point, you may not go that route. There's only going to be so much value with Elijah Mitchell. If CMC goes down, you're not replacing him one for one. Or Elijah Mitchell doesn't have, like, some of the cuffs have actually more upside if they were no longer the cuff. So Elijah Mitchell's not your guy. I don't know in a league how much value 60% Elijah Mitchell has relative to some of the other cuffs that are out there if you're trying to roster and stash someone else's cuff. Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle, they're going to cannibalize each other. This wasn't a Devo week. This was an Ayuk and Kittle week. So again, that's just how it's going to go. You kind of know what you already have with the Niners. And if you're a little squeamish about rolling out Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle, again, plan your roster accordingly. Defense, I just have don't get cute. They play Seattle this week. So moving on to the Bears, Justin Fields was 16 to 23, 169 and a tug. He had another 18 for 104 on the ground. From a fantasy perspective, and that's really all we care about here, he's in that sub elite to solid QB1 range rest of season. You kind of know that he may have some clunkers that he'll throw out there because of maybe some limitations with the coaching and ability, but overall that rushing floor is going to keep him competitive, and then whatever else you get from a scoring standpoint is just the gravy, because he can get it done either with his arm or with his legs, and chasing touchdowns is what wins you leagues. So anyway, Khalil Herbert was at 43%, 16 for 35, another 3 for 2 for 6 on the through the air. Devonta Foreman was only at 24% snaps, 6 for 14, but he did leave with an ankle. So this is going to open the door for Roshan, who was at 33%, 6 for 3 for 30. I don't know how much value he's going to have in this offense with splitting time with Khalil Herbert. But again, if I'm the Herbert owner, I want to be picking up Roshan at this point. If I'm in a league where Roshan is available and compared to some of the other guys that are out there right now, I would be picking up Roshan because there is a road for him to at least win a week if Herbert goes down again. Or down the line, if the Bears just decide they want to see what they have with Roshan and give him the bulk of the work. Darrington Evans, who we're kind of following as the third running back, was cut last Thursday. So that again opens the door for Roshan to potentially win a league in the playoffs. DJ Moore was at 97% snaps, 9 for 7 for 96 and a tug. And at this point, he's just a set and forget along with Fields. He's going to be in that boom bust wide receiver 2 category. I think he's got a little higher floor than he was in the past, but again, he can be in that low end wide receiver 1 range. It just depends on how consistent he's going to be going forward. From a predictability standpoint, yeah, he can have some bad games, but he could also just have a relatively safe floor. It's going to be hard to tell. Again, predictability. Cole Kmet was at 79% snaps, 4 for 3 for 20. He's going to be in that boom bust tight end tier rest of the season. He's going to be really similar. I have written down in my notes to like a poor man's Kittle. He probably can go up against some of those elite tight ends if you get him in the right week, but I don't think there's any way to predict that. So, I personally wouldn't be, if I had Kmet and I didn't have a better option, I wouldn't be trying to get cute with him because he's gonna have that spike week and he's gonna be on your bench if you try and chase somebody else's dragon. The defense is sneaky at this point at Minnesota because Josh Dobbs is a turnover machine, and all defenses that go up against turnover machines are good plays. All right, the Bengals. So Joe Burrow's done for the year. If you haven't heard about that, Jake Burrow in relief was 8 for 14 for 68. Another surprisingly, because I don't even remember this from college, he's another 4 for 40 on the ground. So he's going to be in that serviceable range, and he's probably streamable by matchup just because of the toys. Now, when we talk about the toys, there is going to be a slight downgrade to all of the weapons there. I don't know how much it's going to be. I don't know. Jake Browning hasn't really got any track record when it comes to this, but again, just because of the weapons there in Cincinnati, it becomes more of a coaching issue. And if they can scheme him up to at least use his weapons serviceably, then it may not be such a huge downgrade overall to the weapons there. But again, like if my idea was that Jamar Chase was going to win me a league, that's probably not in the cards at this point, but it does mean that he could still be a very solid wide receiver 2 or low end wide receiver 1. And again, the bigger problem with the Bengals was never about Joe Burrow. It was about how many weapons they had there and how they cannibalize each other. So at this point, depending on how guys roll out, if they lean on Jamar Chase more, he could still be that volume-based player like we kind of saw with Garrett Wilson. That blew up on our faces this week. But again, if they just decide they're going to give Jamar Chase 15 targets because he's their best player, from a fantasy perspective, I'll take that. And that's probably more valuable going into playoffs than trying to get that week where Jamar Chase goes like 6 for 6 for like 150 and 2 touchdowns. Anyway, Joe Mixon, again, this is a slight downgrade as from him standpoint in particular, because he's not going to have as many opportunities to score. He's a volume-based RB2. So I don't see that changing. If you're cuffing, Travion Williams is still the cuff. He was at 31% snaps this week with 2 carries for 20 yards. Chase Brown was designated to return from IR, and this is probably the bigger threat to Mixon and then cuffing Mixon with Williams, because if Chase Brown comes back and continues to eat into the workload, knowing that Joe Mixon may not be in the cards next year, that would be a bigger issue to me. So something that I would be following going forward, especially from a dynasty standpoint. Should be rostered already in all of dynasty leagues, but from a redraft perspective, if Chase Brown starts eating into Travion Williams, he's going to either be the cuff or he's going to potentially even eat into Mixon, and then there's a chance that Mixon will be shut down and Chase Brown will get at least the opportunity at this point to be a bell cow. So that's something to be monitoring going forward heading into playoffs. Like all I have on T. Higgins is a big question mark. I haven't heard anything on that one. Boyd was at 90% snaps. Trenton Irwin was at 95% snaps. So again, between those two guys, if T. Higgins remains out, I would probably be chasing Trenton Irwin because of the possibility of a higher ceiling than Tyler Boyd. But Tyler Boyd has had some good usage. And again, at this point, predictability, I would not be rolling either one of those out until I know exactly what's going to go on with Jake Browning. Chasing those tight ends, Irv Smith was at 39% snaps. Drew Sample was at 30% snaps. Tanner Hudson was at 34% snaps. He was 4 for 4 for 49. None of these guys are probably worth chasing unless Tanner Hudson's snap share goes up, and then we see how Jake Browning and the offense want to be utilizing him. But as long as there's a third to third to third snap share with them, it's not even really worth chasing at this point, even the stash. Defensively, they got Pittsburgh. We'll talk about Pittsburgh later. So they do still have some sneaky weekly appeal going forward, trying to stream around them or to stream holding somebody else like the 49ers. The Bills, Josh Allen's elite. There's not a lot to be talking about there. So James Cook was at 46% snaps, 17 for 73, 4 for 3 for 29, and a tug. if he can hover around there, then he's going to have a lot more fantasy value. But again, if you're rolling him out as your RB2, you're rolling him out as your RB2. You're going to take those sub 40-degree days with those like weeks that he can win you along with it. Latavius Murray was at 32% snaps, 10 for 35. And then this was also a wonky script against that Jets defense because, obviously this was a blowout. There's no Uncle Lenny news, even though the coaches basically said that they're trying to integrate Leonard Fournette into the lineup. I don't know what would happen if it would be more of a timeshare between all three backs going into the playoffs. Again, they all tend to seem to have a role. If there's a role that Uncle Lenny would take, it would be Murray's role. But I could also see him eating into all the work. But if they're not really trying to push it forward, then I don't know how big of a deal it's going to be going forward. That's predictable. Diggs was 8 for 4 for 27. And at this point, I'm not worried about it. This was the first game after they fired the OC. This is something we've always seen with the Bills is Diggs last few years has kind of gone away late in the season. There is some stuff to talk about them going forward. Gabe Davis was at 88% snaps, no targets. Khalil Shakur was at 74% snaps, 4 for 3 for 115, and a tug was the 81-yard touchdown. And again, some of this is good for real football and bad for fantasy from a predictability standpoint. Dalton Kincaid was at 67% snaps. Again, remember, this was a blowout. 7 for 6 for 46. And Quentin Morris, the other tight end, was at 38% snaps. And this was probably a game script issue. Dawson Knox is eligible to come off IR, but the coach has already said that he won't right now. The defense does have New England in the chip. So all of this, like going forward, there may be some predictability when it comes to matchups. If we think the Bills are going to be in these uglier script games, they may not go to Diggs or to Davis. Again, chasing that wide receiver 3 and Khalil Shakur. Shakur is not the wide receiver 2 by usage. It's still Dalton Kincaid is the wide receiver 2 behind Diggs. 8 targets to 7 targets. Shakur had 4 targets. You look at Cook was in 4 targets. Again, that may be all matchup based stuff. So trying to predict any of this, I don't like it outside of Diggs and Kincaid. And I'm not benching either one of those guys going forward. If it comes to worry about Khalil Shakur, I think there will be Gabe Davis weeks going forward and Khalil Shakur weeks. So if I was going to roll Khalil Shakur going forward, it would be knowing that there are going to be weeks where he just absolutely puts up nothing like Gabe Davis does. It's really going to depend on the stuff that we can't predict in fantasy. So moving forward to the Broncos. So Rush, let's see. I wouldn't be streaming him this week against the Browns. I got Javonte was at 49% snaps, 11 for 37, and another 2 for 2 for 16. Pirine and McLaughlin were at 36 and 15% snaps combined. They had 2 carries, but they did have 12 targets for 12 receptions and 74 yards. So again, my expectations of Javonte are going to be matchup dependent. It may be a Javonte week. You could kind of guess at this point he's going to get about 50% of the snaps and about 50% of the work. The game script between these two teams is probably going to be relatively ugly. So I wouldn't expect high efficiency from Javonte going forward. But if they can get in the red zone, he's got an opportunity to score. And again, the running back landscape is so bad that I would, I'm rolling him out, and I'm just have to have my expectations that like he's going to burn me on particular weeks because of the the offense and how he's utilized. Cortland Sutton was at 80% snaps, 5 for 4 for 66 in a tug. And again, I don't need to know how the sausage is made. He just keeps getting me there with touchdowns. Jerry Jeudy was at 71% snaps, 7 for 5 for 58. Marvin Mims was at 56% snaps, 3 for 2 for 12. I don't think either one of those guys are fantasy relevant. If you're rolling Jerry Jeudy out in that wide receiver 3 type flex range, maybe he can get home a couple times with a tug rest of the season. But again, there are probably better guys to be chasing than that relative 40-degree floor that he may be able to get you. The defense has some appeal going forward. They have Cleveland. Week 16, they have the Patriots, and they do have the Chargers in the chip, and the Chargers have been rather, volatile as an offense. So the Browns DTR was 24 for 42, 165 and a pick, and he does another 3 for 20. He is going to be streamable. He's going to have some rushing floor. He's going to be able to throw a touchdown pass. It's going to be heavily non-predictive, more than likely, about when they're going to get done. The surprising thing with the backfield was that Jerome Ford was at 49% snaps, 12 for 31 and a touchdown, another 5 for 2 for 8 in the passing game. And he just basically disappeared after the opening drive. He had like 7 carries for like 29 yards on the opening drive. Did get his touchdown from the 1 yard line. And then because of the game script, like I don't know what happened to him. Hunt was at 44% snaps, 12 for 36, again, not efficient. Another 3 for 3 for 1, again, not efficient. I would imagine that the cuff for Jerome Ford is actually Pierre Strong, even though he didn't get any work this game. And the reason behind that is I don't think that Kareem Hunt's usage will change in this offense if Jerome Ford goes down. I imagine that Pierre Strong would get the Jerome Ford work. He would be at about 49% of the snaps. But Kareem Hunt would still potentially get the goal line usage and maybe some of the higher value receiving work if they don't trust him in that. So that would be if Hunt isn't available in my league to cuff with Jerome Ford. Amari Cooper was 8 for 4 for 34. And again, I think this is going to make him very volatile in that wide receiver 2 range. I could see DTR going forward becoming more consistent and having better matchups than this last week against Pittsburgh. But again, from a fantasy football perspective, how predictive is that going to be? Elijah Moore is back on the wide receiver 3 radar, 7 for 6 for 60. Cedric Tillman is working in. He was at 88% snaps, only 2 for 1 for 2 in the passing game, but he did have another carry. So he will have a spike week. Again, can we predict it ahead of time? Right now, the answer is no. David Njoku was at a season high 89% snaps, 15 targets, 7 receptions, 56 yards. The problem with that is as much as he's a middle of the road to low end tight end 1, he's just not being used vertically. I don't think he'll ever be used vertically. So again, if I have Njoku, I'm not chasing anybody else because there's no point to chase. I'm not going to have a tight end that has better opportunities than 15 touches, and most of those are designed. But again, I have to have the expectations that a guy like Cole Kmet is going to have a higher ceiling relative to some of those elite tight ends going into playoffs. The Browns right now, they're looking at Denver and then at the Rams going forward. So if I'm planning accordingly, I can probably roll them out next couple of weeks. All right, moving on to the Bucs. This was a little bit predictive. They had a what we call a bad matchup against the 49ers. Excuse me. Baker May was 29 of 45. I didn't even write down his passing yardage. I think he had like 2 something in this game. 1 tug, 1 pick, another 3 for 5 on the ground and a fumble lost. And again, this would be something if I was rolling Baker May out, it would be matchup dependent, and I would have known not to roll him out this game. Rashad White was at 80% snaps, 9 for 30 and a tug, and another 7 for 6 for 28 in the passing game. And again, this is what we would expect out of him, realizing that the offense is slow and he's going to have a limited opportunity to score on the ground. But he was the guy who punched it in from 1 yard out. So like his value really comes from that receiving work in half PPR and PPR. Going forward, he's going to be an RB1. Low end RB1 because of the lack of his ability to run the football and how bad how not good the offense is. Chase Edmonds was at 21% snaps, 4 for 8, and another 1 for 1 for 11. And again, I think that Sean Tucker was active and Keyshawn Vaughn was inactive, but neither of them were involved. So there isn't a cuff to your Rashad White shares. I imagine it becomes a running back by committee if he goes down. Mike Evans is going to stay in there as that low-end wide receiver 1. He was at 79% snaps, 12 for 5 for 43 and a tug. I didn't write down his air yards, but they were kind of ridiculous this game. I can actually go look them up for you if I pull them up. So he is one of the more valuable guys heading into the playoffs just because of his usage. And if they keep this up going forward, Mike Evans was at 174 air yards. Again, I'm not big on chasing air yards all the time, but something like that would allow me to go any given week. Mike Evans could be the wide receiver 1 overall because of those air yards, how he's being used in the offense. He is getting touchdowns, and he's gonna be in this weird wide receiver 1 boom bust range where he can likely get me home every single week with how they're using him, but there are going to be weeks where he just absolutely feasts, and how predictive that's going to be is going to be much more difficult. I would have thought he would have had a better game than he did against the 49ers, believe it or not, but he got home regardless. Godwin was at 80% snaps, 7 for 6 for 39, and again, this is going to keep him in that wide receiver 3 range. Trey Palmer was at 72% snaps. I was slightly expecting to see a flop in usage between those two guys. That didn't happen. He was only 6 for 4 for 22, but he's not going away. Cade Otton was at 96% snaps, 5 for 4 for 49. And he's probably a stream against better defenses at this point. So if I was looking to roll Cade Otton out, it would be in games like where they're going up against a good defense. They're going to take away your Mike Evans, your Chris Godwins, and they're going to check it down to your Cade Ottons and your Rashad Whites. The defense does have a favorable schedule going forward. They have at the Colts, Carolina, at the Falcons, and stupid Arthur Smith, and then at the Green Bay Packers. All right, moving on to the Cards. So I was expecting a little bit better game out of the Cardinals and the Texans. Kyler Murray was 20 of 30 for 214, a tug and a pick, and another 7 for 51 and a tug. The game kind of bogged down in the second half. James Conner was at 69% snaps, 14 for 62, another 3 for 2 for 1. Did get a red zone carry. Tony Jones, a little surprising, was at 26% snaps, 1 for 10, and another 1 for 1 for 11. This kind of gives you an idea what the Cards think of Keontae Ingram at this point. He was at 0% snaps. So the two interesting things going forward with Tony Jones being elevated and then being the change of pace guy to James Conner is that Demercado and Michael Carter will eventually be back. Like Demercado because of injury, Michael Carter because of being new to the offense. And I would imagine that one of those two guys is going to take over. Moving forward into this week, guessing who is the handcuff going forward. Maybe it's Demercado, maybe it's Michael Carter. That's something to be paying attention to, who's active and inactive, and then trying to scoop that guy up if you're looking to cuff your James Conner shares. Okay, Hollywood Brown, and he's going to be a bust right now when it comes to the speculation about if he's going to actually win you some leagues. He was at 95% snaps, 5 for 2 for 18, did have 91 air yards, and he's going to probably be matchup dependent at this point. Michael Wilson was out with a shoulder, but the interesting thing about this, Rondale Moore was at 72% snaps. He was 1 for 1 for 48 and a tug. It was this kind of weird downfield shot to him, which he doesn't usually do, and kind of longer developing type play. He took over the Michael Wilson role. So I would still be stashing Michael Wilson, expecting that eventually he may do what we thought Hollywood Brown was going to do in this offense. And the reason why I say that is because Greg Dortch in this game was at 8 for 6 for 76 with 45 air yards. So he took over the Rondale Moore role in the offense, and Rondale Moore took over the Michael Wilson role, and Hollywood Brown was in his normal role. So again, if we kind of look at this, we can kind of see that Michael Wilson will be in that more valuable role moving forward in the offense. If teams are going to take away Hollywood Brown, which it looks like they're going to do, we would expect those targets would go to Michael Wilson in this offense. And Michael Wilson is a better player than Rondale Moore is. Rondale Moore is in that Greg Dortch role this week, where he's going to be in those short area, less fantasy valuable slot role. So Trey McBride was at 100% snaps, 7 for 5 for 43. And again, at this rate, he still may be the most valuable piece of all these guys in the offense, especially because he's a tight end. That 5 for 43 and being the number 2 target guy this week. So right now they do play the Rams this week. The Rams have kind of not been good on offense, but there are probably better options going forward. All right, moving on to the Chargers. Justin Herbert was 21 of 36, 262 tugs. The surprising thing with here, he did do 8 for 73 on the ground. So I would not be benching my Justin Herbert shares, but I do think that there is something going on there. But as long as he can give me that like rushing floor, he is less of a streamer and more of a weekly start. Again, if I have Justin Herbert, I already probably spent on him and probably attached to him for the rest of the year, unless I magically got a CJ Stroud, Kyler Murray, or somebody like that off of waivers. Austin Eckler was at 71% snaps, 10 for 64, another 3 for 2 for 6 in the passing game. Did lose a fumble. Josh Kelly was 29%, 6 for 13 and a cuff. At this point, I think with the Chargers offense, they're just going to be very unpredictable. Some offenses we thought were going to be good are going to be bad, or in this case, not good. Keenan Allen is going to be a league winner, 16 targets overall, 10 receptions, 116 yards and a tug. Quentin Johnson continues to flirt with being fantasy viable. He was at 86% snaps, 6 targets, 2 receptions, 21 yards, 100 air yards. So from a wide receiver 3 type, wide receiver 2 perspective, going forward, he's a guy that is going to have a boom bust week. It's probably going to be highly unpredictable, but we do know it will happen at this point because of usage. Jalen Guyton was at 79% snap, 6 for 4 for 41 and a tuck. I actually don't even know if I just left that in. So I will go check that for you guys and screwed up. Yeah, that was just left in. So never disregard Jalen Guyton. I just left that in my notes. Must have missed that. Gerald Everett was out with a back injury, and this pushed Donald Parham into that streamer territory at 72% snaps, 6 for 4 for 57. Uh, Tight end Stone Smart, who I believe, since I have them up already, is a rookie or one, first year guy out of Old Dominion. I don't know anything about him. He did vulture a 51-yard touchdown catch. It was a catch and run. It wasn't air yards. So again, when guys are being kind of used in this role, and you can see that he was at 35% snaps this game. It took away from a guy like Donald Parham being able to be pushed into that high end tight end one range just because of usage. But again, the tea leaf said Gerald Edwards out, the starting tight end for the Chargers, is a roll this week, and he probably got you that 40-degree day from that tight end position. All right, the defense is definitely no at Baltimore this week, but then they are going to be a yes week 13 with the at the Patriots. All right, the Chiefs, they played Monday Night Football. It was an ugly game. Kind of predictive at this point of how the Chiefs offense is going to go. Patrick Mahomes was 24-43, 177, two touchdowns, one pick, and another 6 for 38 on the ground. As long as he can get that 6 for 38 on the ground, he's going to have that relative floor that he can overcome these lackluster weeks that seem to be piling up at this point. Isaiah Pacheco was at 61% snaps. This is kind of what we knew he was going to do. Another 19 for 89 and another 1 for 1 for 2. He did have 4 red zone carries, so he's going to be in that volume-based RB2 range, but there's going to be some limits to him. Jerick McKinnon was at, again, 30% snaps. This is all predictive usage, 1 for 7, another 3 for 2 for 8. So again, that little bit of usage by McKinnon, even though Pacheco didn't get home, would push Pacheco into that low end wide receiver one or running back one range that he can't ever get to as long as McKinnon is, from a half PPR perspective, getting those 2 receptions for 8 yards. CEH is still hanging around there, 5% snaps, 2 for 20 on the ground. And again, that's just more work that Isaiah Pacheco is not getting. That pushes him out of that range of being able to do that. So my expectations are that Pacheco is going to be a heavily touchdown dependent RB2 going forward, kind of in that Joe Mixon type tier, or Joe Mixon before the Burrow injury. So Rashee Rice, the post-bye rookie bump that we're kind of holding him for, didn't happen. He was only at 57% snaps, which is actually down 5 for 4 for 42, did have 19 overall air yards. And again, I bring up the air yards because Justin Watson was at 63% snaps, 11 targets, 5 receptions, 53 yards. He did have the red zone target this week, 134 air yards. So from a fantasy perspective, if there's a guy that I'm chasing in this offense right now after waivers, it's Justin Watson. Not only that, he would be a guy that I would be interested just automatically throwing into my lineup and seeing if I could chase that production moving forward to next week. Not just from the standpoint of can I get the tug, but if I can get more of those air yards and 11 targets on a week-to-week basis. But this offense is kind of broken because of the usage of the wide receivers. Tony was at 28% snaps, 2 for 2 for 12, did have a red zone carry. Again, something that takes away from both Pacheco and the other wide receivers in this offense, even Travis Kelce's ability to score touchdowns. Sky Moore was back to 51% snaps, 2 for 1 for 4. MVS was at 47% snaps, 3 targets, a huge drop that cost him the game. And these guys that keep making mistakes, they keep being rolled out by the Chiefs. We don't see their usage actually being augmented too much. McCole Hardman was at 20% snaps, 2 for 2 for 12. Again, this is all just taking away from a guy being fantasy viable. So, I may drop my Rashee Rice shares this week and go a different direction. There may be somebody that's more valuable to me from a fantasy perspective going into playoffs than holding under Rashee Rice coming out of the bye that didn't pan out. Justin Watson, I might actually go to instead, but I'm probably no longer chasing any parts of this this offense, even though Pacheco has value and Kelsey is a weekly play, unicorn, 94% snaps, 9 for 7 for 44. Noah Gray was at 41% snaps and 1 target for you dynasty guys that are wondering. The defense at this point, especially after what they did against the Eagles, is a weekly role. I would be streaming them around them on week 14, their matchup against the Bills, because that's what it tells me to do. But if I can't stream around them because of my lineup or my roster, Josh Allen's a turnover machine. So at this point, if I have the Chiefs, I might not be really getting cute with my defensive play. So the Colts were on bye. The only real news about the Colts that I have is they released Darius Leonard on defense. Darius Leonard has been injured. I don't think this really has any impact on anything from fantasy perspective, even on defense. And the Colts weren't really going to be a weekly role anyway from there. All right. Sam Howell was at 31% or 31 to 45, 255, a tug, 3 picks. Again, something we kind of knew we're going to have those weeks. He is like Kirk Cousins-esque. Another 3 for 35 and a tug on the ground that turned into a brawl. B-Rob, I was looking at someplace that someone said that B-Rob is running back 4 overall in full PPR. So again, I'm not even thinking about whether or not it's a B-Rob week or anything. I'm just rolling him out knowing that he's going to have some sub 40-degree days and he's going to have some league winner or weekly winner weeks, and I just don't have any control over it. He was in that bell cow role this week with Gibson out, 78% snaps, 17 for 73, 9 for 7 for 58, fumbled but did not lose it, but he didn't score any touchdowns. Chris Rodriguez was back, 20% snaps, 6 for 43, 1 for 1 for 5, but he did lose a fumble. So I would be kind of paying attention to Antonio Gibson and Chris Rodriguez going forward. If I'm the B-Rob owner, Chris Rodriguez, I'm cuffing him for the time being. When Gibson comes back, maybe I could drop Chris Rodriguez, pick up Antonio Gibson. Scary Terry was at 80% snaps, 7 for 5 for 43. And with the schedule, and I should probably look that up, with the schedule going forward for the Redskins, I would be downgrading the weapons. So they have Dallas, Miami. That's going to be a shootout. They have a bye week. The Rams, the Jets, and San Francisco. So those three games that there were 3-4 games that they have, Dallas and the Dolphins. Dolphins defense is okay. But the Jets in week 16 and week 17, San Francisco. So again, I would be downgrading my expectations of what these guys are going to give me, especially with this kind of change in the offense where it's been more of a check down and less vertical based offense. Curtis Samuel played, but he was ejected. Dotson was at 70% snaps, 4 for 3 for 23 and a tug. I'm not looking much beyond Scary Terry if I'm rolling wide receivers out here. Logan Thomas was at 70% snaps, 8 for 5 for 58, fumble loss. And again, I'm not if I'm rolling out Logan Thomas, I'm probably trying to just catch lightning in a bottle someplace else. Like Darnold Parham would be a guy that I would be rolling out, benching Logan Thomas if I had Logan Thomas as my tight end one on a week-to-week basis. So the Cowboys, and again, the entire offense of the Cowboys is going to be non-predictive because of how good the defense is versus the matchups. They have to kind of get in these shootouts, and I don't know how many shootouts they're going to get into. They also have to kind of just want to run the score up on their opponent, and I don't know what was going on. This was a week that I thought they would run the score up. It was a relatively close game for, relative to the blowout that we thought it was going to be. So Dak was 25 of 38, 189, 2 tugs, and another 2 for 6 on the ground. So again, he's going to be that sub elite to solid set and forget tight end or quarterback one, kind of like a Brock Purdy going forward. Tony Pollard got into the end zone this week. He was at 63% snaps, 12 for 61, and another 5 for 4 for 19 on the ground. And again, I think that my expectations of Pollard are going to be overall muted, but he is by usage attached to a good offense. So he's going to be in that low end, a running back one, high end running back two going forward. You'll similar to what we talked about with Mixon or Pacheco, but he has better overall usage than Pacheco does. Rico Dowdle was at 29% snaps. Again, this was kind of a blowout. 8 for 23, another 2 for 2 for -3. He was a DNP on Monday and Tuesday, so be advised if he doesn't go on Thursday, because the Cowboys play on Thursday, it's traditional. I could be dropping him and picking up something else in that spot if he doesn't go, as opposed to trying to cuff Pollard going forward. I don't know what the role would be if Pollard goes down and Redoubtable goes down. I don't know what they would do from a running back situation. CD Lamb was at 79% snaps, 9 for 6 for 38 in a tug. I did see he had an ankle, but I think I saw one report today that he was full practice, another one that he was limited. He said he's going to play, no big deal. Brandon Cooks was at 72% snaps, 4 for 3 for 42. Gallup was at 35% snaps, 5 for 3 for 31. And again, because of the game flow, what was going on, I don't know how much to take away from either one of those things because Gallup did get targets on his 35% snaps, and Cooks was at less targets at greater amounts of snaps. Again, that defense is going to make everything really unpredictable from an offensive standpoint. And usually, I don't like unpredictability in my fantasy. Let's see. Tolbert was at 42% snaps. He had 5 targets, 2 for 12. And Jake Ferguson, the tight end, was at 72% snaps, 5 for 3 for 32. Again, he's going to be in that low end tight end one, high end or low end to mid range tight end one because he's attached to this offense. He's going to have the ability to score in the red zone. Luke Schoonmaker, the rookie, was at 35% snaps, second touchdown of the year, 2 for 2 for 23. So again, if they're kind of being wonky with their usage, that's unpredictable. That's going to cut into Ferguson's overall value going forward. So be advised, if I have my Ferguson shares, it would make me a little bit more concerned on a week-to-week basis rolling him out. But again, tight ends can't lose me my week. So, I wouldn't overthink him too much. The defense, they have Washington this week. So, and then they have a very rough stretch week 13 into the chip. I can talk about that because I know they play Seattle after this week. And then let's see, they have Washington this week that I would roll them. Seattle right now, Seattle hasn't looked particularly good. I think I would feel pretty happy against Geno Smith that week. Philadelphia is going to be very difficult to predict that game. But with their defense, if I can't pick up another defense and I don't want to get cute, I would roll them out. The Chiefs defense held their ground against the Philadelphia offense, so I wouldn't be concerned. Buffalo, I might not be cute with. Again, Josh Allen's a turnover machine. Miami's offense hasn't looked as good, and they definitely haven't looked as good against good defenses. And then Detroit's offense does look good. So I could get cute and try and stream around them. But again, at this point, I could just roll them out. That's up to you. I don't know what I would do going forward. All right, the Dolphins. Tua was 28-39, 325, 2 tugs, a pick, and a fumble loss. And I kind of called this. The Raiders have looked better, and I think teams are figuring out how to play the Dolphins. So Mostert was at 79% snaps. I think I said 85 in the Chasing the Dragon video. Anyway, he was 22 carries, 86, 2 for 1 for 7. And again, it starts to bother me with running backs that were overvalued when they're not scoring touchdowns. Sometimes touchdowns are unpredictable. And they're not getting receiving work to bolster them if they're not getting the touchdowns. So A-Chain re-aggravated his knee. I heard that that might have been really bad, but then he woke up. He felt good today, and I saw that he was a limited practice for Friday's game. So that's something to pay attention to. Jeff Wilson was a healthy inactive in this game. Solomon Ahmed was at 29% snaps. It doesn't really matter what the stats line was because they IR'd him today. Tyreek Hill was at 59% snaps because of hand, but he did do 11 for 10 for 146 in a tug. So if I haven't heard anything on that, I haven't heard anything on that. Waddle was at 83% snaps, 8 for 4 for 55. And again, I think he is a bust this year, but if I drafted him at this point, I should know what I paid for. I should probably be downgrading him into that wide receiver 3 flex range. He's going to have his weeks, but that means that in that wide receiver 2 range, I want to probably be playing from a safer floor standpoint. So if like a Jayden Reed this week with that downgrade of Waddle, maybe something I'd be looking at. Chase Claypool had a knee procedure, and he's probably not going to be a thing this year. That's where he was this week. The defense, they do have a pretty good schedule going forward, as I could pull them up so I could talk about them. So if the Miami Dolphins offense continues to be good, they are going to be able to put pressure on the other teams going forward. So they do have the Jets this week. The Jets flopped their quarterback Tim Boyle, who I think is actually downgrades from Zach Wilson. Then they have the Redskins, the Tennessee Titans, the Jets again, and then I'm not playing them in Dallas and Baltimore, but there is that span from week 12 to week 15 that I would feel relatively good rolling out the Dolphins defense. The Eagles, See, Monday night game, again, ugly game. Jalen Hurts, 14 for 22, 150 yards, pick, another 12 for 29 on the ground, but he did have 2 tugs. Again, elite quarterbacks doing elite level rushing things. Did have 1 fumble, but he didn't lose it. DeAndre Swift. So this is what we're talking about with Dallas Goedert being out. By the way, he didn't go on IR, but we'll talk about the tight ends here in a second. Usually one of there are vacated targets. They tend to go to running backs. So this week, DeAndre Swift was 3 for 31 in the passing game. That's what we like to see. That would tend to make me think that he may be creeping back up into that low end wide receiver or running back 1 range. Hopefully you guys heard that motorcycle. He was at 64% snaps, 12 for 76 in a tug. Kenny Gainwell is still going to be hanging around there. Swift did get the red zone carries. That I think there's only 1 he scored on it. Kenneth Gainwell is at 30% snaps, 1 carry, one target, 1 reception. Boston Scott, sneaked in there at 13% snaps, 2 carries for 8 yards. And then my thoughts that Penny was going to be a thing. He was a healthy scratch this game, so that's what that thought process was obviously wrong. AJ Brown was at 95% snaps. 4 for 1 for 8, and Devontae Smith 95% snaps, 8 for 6 for 99. That was kind of the idea coming into the season, that these high end wide receivers, when they have more than one on a team, can cannibalize each other. And this is just one of those games where it happened. The problem in this game is the Chiefs defense is probably a little bit better than we originally thought at the beginning of the year. So there's just overall was less opportunities to go around in this game. Julio Jones was at 57% snaps, 2 for 5. Like I said, Dallas Goedert did not go on the IR. That means that they're expecting him to be back within 4 weeks after his forearm procedure on a broken forearm. Jake Stoll was the guy who led all tight ends at 55% snaps. He was 2 for 1 for 3. Then there was a guy by the name of Grant Calcaterra. I don't know anything about him. He's at 21% snaps. So the idea that from a fantasy perspective, if you've been following Albert O, the tight end, he was only at 18% snaps, no opportunities. So the tight ends are not going to be a thing more than likely for Philadelphia as long as Goddard's out. And then I do have the defense is a no because of schedule. Maybe there's a slight bit of hope going forward that I would roll them out. But again, Kansas City offense has not been particularly what we thought they were going to be. So I don't know how much this is the defense. They have been disappointing, or how much this is just the Kansas City offense is not as good. So the Falcons, Desmond Ritter was renamed the starter. I don't know how much that moves the needle at all for any of the pieces in the Falcons offense. I could definitely see there could be some change going forward after the bye week. But overall, I do like it better. I think Ritter is better than Taylor Heineke at this point, just slightly so. But overall, I don't know what it does. The defense, let's see. I have pickup for at the New York Jets week 13. That's what I have with the Falcons defense. So if you're in that situation, you don't have one of those elite to sub-elite defenses, this would be the week to be picking them up to roll next week against Tim Boyle-led Jets offense. Let's see, the Giants. So I will say that if you watch Razor Fist on YouTube, you know what I'm thinking right now when it comes to Tommy DeVito. Anyway, he was 18 for 26, 246, and 3 tugs. I did watch some tape on him, and there was just some scheming stuff that was going on. He's not going to light the world on fire or anything like that. Saquon was at 91% snaps, 14 for 83, 5 for 4 for 57. Again, 2 touchdowns, design passing work, always good. I don't know if there's going to be another predictive matchup against a team like the Redskins going forward. Darius Slayton was at 51% snap. He left with an arm, but before he did, he was 5 for 4 for 82 and a tug. So I was wrong about the guy who got home, but one of the guys did get home against the Redskins. I thought it was going to be Jalen Hyatt. He was only at 53% snaps, 2 for 1 for 7. Let's see. I have Wan'Dale Robinson was at 67% snaps. I don't care. Isaiah Hodgins was at 44% snaps. I don't care. Daniel Bellinger was at 93% snaps, 3 for 3 for 38. And again, this is a guy that I would be streaming over other guys like a Logan Thomas, some of the other guys out there. I think going forward that Daniel Bellinger can have multiple fantasy relevant weeks with that usage. And the defense this week with the Giants, the tea leaves say they are a roll against the Patriots if you want to do that thing. All right. Let's see. The Jaguars. This is the other thing when we talk about Tommy DeVito being predictive this week against the Redskins. And I said I would rather roll him out against the Redskins than I would Trevor Lawrence against the Titans because of how unpredictable Trevor Lawrence has been. And this actually proves me right, even though he was the top fantasy guy this week. 24, 32, 262, 2 chugs, 5 for 17, and 2 more tugs on the ground. Again, if I can't predict this outcome, then I don't know if he's going to give me that sub 40 degree day or that league winning week. I have no idea if I should roll him out or not. And I bet there were a lot of people that like got burned by having him on his bench. Again, the name of the game in fantasy is predictability, especially going into the playoffs. I want to know that I have the ability to win my week without my opponent allowing me to win it because they have an unpredictable lineup. Let's see. Travis Etienne, 66% steps, 13 for 52, 3 for 3 for 7. And again, that's starting to concern me a little bit with just how they're getting by without having predictive use of their RB1. I think this is like the second week in a row or something like that. I should look this up before I start talking. So yeah, this is the second week in a row that like ETN's usage has been ugly when it comes to being predicted from a fantasy standpoint. So he goes from that like elite tier running back. This probably tumbles him down to being a non-predictive RB1. Again, boom bust range. So I don't particularly like that, which would mean that I would have to think of him more as an RB2 at this point going forward. Tank Bigsby in the blowout was at 14% snaps, 9 for 21. If I'm cuffing ETN at this point, it would be Dearness Johnson, who was at 24% snaps, 7 for 20, and then another 1 for 1 for 34 in the passing game. That would be the guy I would be cuffing if I was into that type of thing. Calvin Ridley, and then this is another thing when it comes to being predictive. I traded my shares of Calvin Ridley away this week because I was just tired of trying to guess right. He was at 9 targets, 7 receptions, 103 yards, 2 tugs. Christian Kirk was at 76% snaps, 6 for 3 for 48. Zay Jones was in the game, 62% snaps, 4 for 4 for 20. And I had written down in my note, I guess as long as Zay Jones is playing, Ridley is the number 1 and Christian Kirk is the number 2. They flip roles. But then again, I saw a post on Twitter today that said that on 2 of the receptions that Calvin Ridley had, Zay Jones wasn't even in the game. So again, that may not be necessarily a thing. It's just how the Jaguars are going to run their offense. And if it's not predictive, I don't know how much I would really be trusting Calvin Ridley to be jumping back in that wide receiver 2 role. I would still keep him in that boom bust wide receiver 3 role going forward rest of season. Evan Ingram was at 63% snaps, 6 for 4 for 29. And again, just from a usage standpoint, he's going to remain that low end tight end 1 going forward. The defense, they do have Cincinnati this week. Remember that they have Jake Browning stepping in. They are a play at the Cleveland, and then they do have a good matchup for the semis and the chip. So they are a defense that I could be picking up and holding and streaming around for the rest of the season if I don't have one of those better defenses. All right, the Jets. So Zach Wilson was benched, and the head coach did come out and say that they did think about just flat out releasing him, but he's moved in that quarterback 3 range. And Tim Boyle, unless he's magically improved by being on the bench like Geno Smith did, like he is not an upgrade to Zach Wilson. If you remember from a fantasy perspective, when he was at Detroit a few years back, I think he's like overall thrown 3 touchdown passes and 9 interceptions in limited use. So like this is not necessarily an upgrade in any way, shape, or form. Rumors are that Aaron Rodgers may be back for week 16. I did read a report today that Aaron Rodgers was jogging today. So, that's something going forward. If they can stay relevant, who knows? Breece Hall was at 63% snaps, 10 for 23, another 6 for 5 for 50 and a tug. Again, this is all coaching stuff. This is less to do with Zach Wilson being bad at football and more to do with the coaches that are just bad. I was listening to some of the other guys talk about this offense, and Nathaniel Hackett is just basically Aaron Rodgers. So they're running the offense that Aaron Rodgers wants to run, and that means the only person in the world that can run this offense is Aaron Rodgers. So from a quarterback standpoint, it doesn't really matter who's the quarterback. They're just doing the stuff that Aaron Rodgers wants to do. So be advised. So Dalvin Cook was at 25% snaps, 2 for 13 and 1 target. If I have Breece Hall and I'm cuffing, it would be Israel Abanikanda, the 6th round pick from Pittsburgh. From a tape standpoint, I think he's kind of a home run guy, like kind of think of Kenneth Walker, but not as good as football. He was at 18% snaps, 1 for 11 on the ground, and they're 2 for 1 for 5. And that would be the guy that I would be cuffing Breece Hall. If Breece Hall goes down, I could definitely see that they're going to see what they have in Abanikanda. They've already talked about wanting to see what they have a ban of Canada. That's why they cut Michael Carter in the first place. Garrett Wilson was at 95% snaps, 8 targets, 2 receptions, 9 yards, lost the fumble. This, I would actually say that, like, not just from a usage standpoint this way, or this usage and productive standpoint this game, I would say overall with Tim Boyle, this is actually a downgrade. So he goes from like what he looked like to be a volume-based wide receiver 2 to, probably, if not just a flat wide receiver 3 again. I might even bench the shares of Garrett Wilson that I still have, because I don't know what they're going to be like after the benching of Zach Wilson and how badly the coaches have been going forward. The defense does have a tough schedule with a bad offense. I think we already talked about them going forward, but I will pull them up and I'll talk about them a little bit more. So if I have my Jets shares, knowing that their offense is going to be really in a bad state, Miami, I'm probably not going to be interested in rolling out the defense. The defense is going to be put in a lot of bad spots because of the offense. Atlanta, maybe I would think about rolling them out there. Houston, CJ Stroud, maybe not. They play at Miami. Again, that's not something I would be interested in. Maybe Washington, maybe at Cleveland to finish off. So there is some usage. It's just going to be tough. They're going to be an overall downgrade because of how bad the offense is. Let's see. The Lions, Goff, 23 of 35, 236, 2 tugs, 3 picks. And again, I do think that Jared Goff has some fantasy value. I think that to a certain extent, it's going to be non-predictive. And I think he is limited from a talent standpoint. So there are better guys, again, like a Brock Purdy, that I would want to be rolling out on a week-to-week basis than trying to play with Jared Goff outside of like 2 quarterback leagues. David Montgomery's at 40% snaps, 12 for 76, got home with a touchdown, another 2 for 2 for 22. Gibbs was at 56% snaps, 8 for 36, got home with a touchdown. It was a 1-yard one, another 6 for 6 for 59. This was kind of what we kind of thought the backfield was going to be between Gibbs and Montgomery going forward at the beginning of the season. I imagine it's going to be in this, this split going on the rest of the way. They're going to have a certain amount of touchdown dependence for their ceiling, and sometimes those touchdowns are non-predictive, especially when there are other guys in the offense. The guy that I would want to have, if I have him and feeling pretty good about it, would be Gibbs with that receiving floor, that 6 for 6 for 59. But overall, this is going to cap their ceiling, even though they are going to be fringe RB1s, high-end RB2s the rest of the way, and I would feel very confident rolling them out. The Sun guy was at 92% snaps, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 77 yards, and a touchdown. And again, this is part of the reason why I would cap the ceiling of all the other guys on the offense. Is the Sun God is going to get his on a week-to-week basis. He's the one guy that I would imagine is going to have the safest of floors. He may be the overall red zone guy when it comes to the passing game. So he's got the best chance to score touchdowns out of all these guys, because Montgomery and Gibbs are going to probably cannibalize each other's opportunities. A guy that I would go picking up again this week would be Jameson Williams. He was up to 65% snaps, 3 for 2 for 44 and a tug. So again, attached to this offense, he's going to have his weeks where he just booms. Like I could see him being like in that Uke role on certain weeks where he goes like 6 for 6 for 150 and 2 touchdowns. So he would be a priority guy that I would be picking up even reactively off of waivers at this point, relative to some of the other guys who are out there, knowing that like he could lose me some weeks, but he could also win me my weeks. And having some of those guys in my lineup come the playoffs is a good thing, as long as I have the ability to roll them out in that wide receiver 3 / wide receiver or flex range, or if I have better guys in my other slots, I can afford to be rolling them out as a wide receiver 2. I talked about this already. Sam Laporte is a slight downgrade, and this is because there's so many weapons in this offense. He was at 85% snaps, 5 for 3 for 18. The defense does go Green Bay and then at New Orleans, and I think they have a lot of value to them because the offense is going to put them in positive scripts. The Packers, with that win against the Chargers, Jordan Love 27 of 40 for 322 and 2 touchdowns. Again, doesn't matter how good at football he is, he's got a lot of toys, so it doesn't matter. Can get me home as that low end quarterback one. Also is going to just be a weekly start in 2 quarterback leagues. I wouldn't overthink it. Aaron Jones did not tear his ACL, but he does have an MCL spared. Obviously doubtful to be rolling out Thursday. AJ Dillon, if he's available, he shouldn't be available in any competitive leagues, but if he was available, he's at 72% snaps, 14 for 29, 4 for 4 for 32. But he was limited yesterday with the groin, so I would check that before putting in anything. And I can do that for you now that I think about it, because this was written up yesterday. So he remains limited. So this would be something I would be looking at if he's not available in my league. They did re-sign James Robinson. So I could definitely see that James Robinson could be the guy that gets that 70% snaps on the Thursday game. All right. Christian Watson was at 78% snaps. 4 for 2 for 21 and a touchdown. He did leave with a shoulder. Romeo Dobbs was at 68% snaps, 6 for 5 for 53 and a tug. Jaden Reed, 69% snaps, 6 for 4 for 46, 3 for 46 on the ground with a tug. And then Dontavian Wicks was at 33% snaps, 5 for 3 for 91 and he did leave with a knee and a concussion. So how I would see this moving forward is I would want to know what are the chances that Christian Watson are going to play? And luckily enough for you, I can go look that up right now. So Dontavian Wicks remains did not participate. This was an hour ago as of recording this. And then Christian Watson listed as full on Tuesday. So it looks like Christian Watson's going to go, which would probably make me think that Jaden Reed is going to remain in that wide receiver 2 type wide receiver 3 range going in. If Christian Watson was going to be out, I would upgrade Jaden Reed to a wide receiver 2 and roll him out with confidence. But if Christian Watson is going to go, the only thing that Jaden Reed's going to benefit from is these targets that Wicks is not going to get. I think Dobbs remains in that relatively safe floor wide receiver 3 range. And there's going to be some volatility in Jaden Reed. I do think he is a good play, especially on Thursday night. It's just I would probably keep my expectations a little muted. Luke Musgrave, I guess it was a worse injury than originally thought with an abdominal issue. He spent the night in the hospital and said that now he's out. So I would not be expecting that he's going to be rolling out on Thursday. If I was trying to chase something in this offense right now, Tucker Kraft is the 3rd rounder. I can pull him up since I'm talking about him. He was the 3rd rounder. Musgrave was the 2nd rounder. He was at 42% snaps, 2 for 2 for 32. He would be a guy that you could get sneaky on and be rolling out going forward. If Musgrave is going to miss some time, I think it would upgrade Kraft overall. But Kraft is in that streaming range this week with Luke Musgrave being out. And sometimes I could definitely see those targets that are vacated do tend to go to tight ends if they don't go to running backs. All right. And then the defense, weeks 14 through 16, they go at the Giants. That's Tommy DeVito, the Buccaneers, Baker May, and then at Carolina. So there is some value to Green Bay if you're trying to stream them around another defense. All right. The Panthers, Bryce Young, I don't care. I don't particularly care much about this offense. Chuba Hubbard was at 49% snaps, 10 for 57, 2 for 2 for 8. Miles Sanders at 46% snaps, 11 for 50, 1 for 1 for 2. And again, if this was one guy, just based off of how bad the offense is, it would put them as a high-end running back 2, but this is being split between 2 guys without a lot of opportunities to score touchdowns. It means they're both not very fantasy relevant. Blackshear was only at 3% snaps. Ghost of Adam Thielen was at 90% snaps, 11 for 8 for 74. And again, I think this moves him all the way down in that safe floor wide receiver 3 range. So there are guys like a Jaden Reed that I would probably be wanting to roll out a little bit more than him. Some of these other wide receiver 3s, like a Jameson Williams, probably has a better chance to win you your league than rolling out Adam Thielen at this point because of the offense. If there is a guy in this offense I'm chasing, it's still Jonathan Mingo, who's at 95% snaps, 6 for 1 for 6. So not very efficient, but he did have 74 air yards. And defense, I just have written down, nope. So the Patriots, and I can pull this up. So they don't know who their quarterback is going to be at this rate. Good old Bill Belichick said everybody needs to be prepared to play. They did go out and re-sign Malik Cunningham is set to rejoin the practice squad. So something to be aware of, especially in 2 quarterback leagues. Malik Cunningham, if they play him, is going to have that rushing floor. So if you really are desperate in like super flex leagues, he would be a guy to be paying attention to heading into the week. Other than that, like there's not a lot to say about them. The defense is a play this week. The tea leaves say roll them out against the Giants if you're going to go chasing that. And again, sometimes doing the thing that is predictable is a good thing. The Raiders, Aiden O'Connell kind of came back to earth this week, 24 for 41, 271, 1 touchdown, 3 picks. I think he's going to have some fantasy relevant weeks in this bad game. There's some stuff to like. There's a lot of stuff to like about him. He still has those warts that he showed in college. Overall, I think this upgrades the offense. It's just a bad week, and I wouldn't be rolling him out outside of maybe your 2 quarterback leagues. So the main thing that hurt this week was Josh Jacobs, who was flirting as being that usage standpoint, being that RB1. 77% snaps, 14 for 39, 1 for 1 for 12. Zamir White was at 0 work. That would be the guy I think is the cuff, but again, it's kind of hard to tell. Amir Abdullah was at 23% snaps. And again, I think as Josh Jacobs goes down, you're going to see a pretty healthy split between Zamir White and the less efficient usage, and then Amir Abdullah getting the passing work. Devontae Adams was at 98% snaps. We love the 13 targets, 7 receptions, 82 yards, and a tug. So again, Aiden O'Connell puts them back into that wide receiver 1 range. Jacoby Myers, 82% snaps, 5 for 4, 49, and this probably puts him in that wide receiver 3 range. Wide receiver 3s grow on trees. Hunter Renfrow was back up to 44% snaps, 5 for 5 for 42. This is probably a game script stuff with him because they were kind of trailing most of the game behind the Dolphins. So again, trying to predict those wide receiver 3 usage, I would probably go a different direction. If you're trying to get cute with Hunter Renfrow, he has been fantasy relevant before. I just don't think it's a thing. The bigger guy in this one, especially from a dynasty perspective, Trey Tucker's back out there, 39% snaps, 7 targets, 2 receptions, 36 yards, 102 air yards. So again, if there's a guy that I need to be throwing out into my lineup trying to catch that lightning in a bottle, again, it would be Trey Tucker. Again, that's what the tea leaves say. Michael Mayer was at 80% snaps, 5 for 4, 46. So that's going to keep him hovering around that tight end one, that low end tight end runs type streamer range. Probably another one of those touchdown dependent types tight ends, but the usage is there. The defense does have some sneaky weekly appeal after their Miami performance, even against KC, who's struggling this week. So, yeah, just something to be aware of if you want to get out there. The Rams, Matt Stafford in this ugly game was 17 of 31, 190, 1 tug, and 1 pick. Darrell Henderson was only at 36% snaps, but we don't care. He was the one getting the receiving work. He was released today because the door is open on Kieran Williams. He's eligible to come off IR. We won't know about that until tomorrow. And then, but the tea leaves are saying that he is going to get elevated. The other thing to be paying attention to is the active inactives on Sunday with the Rams, because that'll give you a better idea of if he's going to go back to that elite workload that he was getting. But again, Royce Freeman was at 63% snaps, 17 for 73. So again, I imagine that Royce Freeman is going to get like 30% of the work, and Kieran Williams is going to go back to getting most of that valuable stuff, and Royce Freeman is just going to be the breather back. Cooper Kupp injured his ankle. They say there's a chance that he has to play this week. I don't know. Got to be paying attention to that. Puka Nacua was limited with a shoulder. He was 88% snap, 7 for 5 for 70 and a tug. And again, if Cooper Kupp can't play, then that would put Tutu Atwell very close to being in wide receiver 2 range. I do have the defense is maybe Cleveland week 13. So I want to verify that in my notes. So yeah, they do have Arizona, which I probably wouldn't be interested in rolling them out against Kyler Murray, but the Cleveland game against DTR would be somebody I would be kind of sneakily looking to roll them out. So picking them up a week early to see how Cleveland does another week with DTR behind the helm, just so I know I don't have to knife fight for them in waivers. If I want to be sneaky about that, would be something I would be looking at. All right, the Ravens. Again, another really unpredictable game. Lamar Jackson got home, 16 for 26, 264, 2 tugs, another 9 for 54 on the ground. But again, trying to predict this offense is going to be difficult. Gus Bus was at 38% snaps, 12 for 62, 2 touchdowns. So if they can get in the goal line, they have been trying. Gus Bus has been getting home when he gets the opportunity, and he has been doing it rather frequently lately. He was 2 for 2 for 8. So again, if I'm rolling out my Gus Bus shares, I know he's just going to be heavily touchdown dependent. Justice Hill, this is the guy that we're expecting Keaton Mitchell to be eating into. He was down at 26% snaps, 1 for 1, another 1 for 1 for 6. So I can imagine that that Keaton Justice Hill snaps are going to continue to go down. Keaton Mitchell was up to 36% snaps, 8 for 33, 1 for 1 for 8. So there is a possibility that Keaton Mitchell could have league-winning upside if he can get the right bounce of the ball where he can score touchdowns, because they're not getting in the goal line situations to give the ball to Gus Bus. And then if he could get into that 60% usage range where he's getting 15 to 20 combined opportunities a game, which I think is going to be difficult for him to do, but he can convert on high efficiency. He does have some ability to win leagues. So at this point with Keaton Mitchell, you can start to think about just having him be your RB2 rest of the season. Again, but this is all about predictability if we can theorize that story to how Keaton Mitchell gets home. A predictability standpoint from the wide receivers, Zay Flowers at 98% snaps, 4 for 3 for 43. OBJ with a shoulder, 33% snaps. I didn't write down the right stat lines for this. He was like 4 for 3 for 115 and a touchdown, or no touchdown. Rashad Bateman, and why don't I just tell you what it is? Because I have this over here. That's why I have this built up. So Odell Beckham was at 33% snaps, 7 targets, 4 receptions, 116 yards, didn't get home, but he does have a shoulder. I've talked about this in the Chasing the Dragon video. If you're interested in him, I do think that they would probably hold him out until after the bye week, and then he'd be back for the Rams. I don't know how consistent that 7 targets is going to be. That would put him in the fringe range of being a wide receiver 2. Again, wide receiver 2s don't grow on trees. Wide receiver 3s do. We'll talk about vacated targets here in a second. Rashad Bateman was at 79% snaps, 2 for 1 for 10 and a touchdown. Nelson Aguilar was at 41% snaps, 1 for 1 for 37 and a touchdown. And again, trying to predict where the higher value plays are going to go, I think is going to be difficult. It did look like at a point Zay Flowers is going to be a wide receiver 2. I don't know if you could predict usage or correct usage going forward. Mark Andrews may be done from a fantasy perspective. He may be back from a real football perspective. He did have surgery. Isaiah Likely is a good dart throw to replace him. He only had 2 targets on his 74% snaps. Again, tight ends are easier on the lineup, so he can't lose me my week just throwing him out there. He can only win me my week. He would be the guy that I would be chasing out of all these guys from a vacated target standpoint. They tend to go to running backs. Again, this would be a reason why I would be looking at Keaton Mitchell over trying to predict those Mark Andrew targets going to even Isaiah Likely or to the other wide receivers. All right. And then I have written down the defense is a weekly play. They do have a bye week, week 13. So I would have to be aware that I would be streaming at least 1 week if I have the Ravens defense. All right. The Saints. I did read yesterday, Derek Carr is still in the concussion protocol, so there is a possibility that Jameis Winston could start this week. The other thing is Michael Thomas was IR'd. I don't think that necessarily this changes Rashid Shaheed, and I can bring this up. I already talked about this before. I don't think this necessarily changes Rashid Shaheed being outside of anything but a boom bust wide receiver 3. I think he has a little bit more value because those targets have to go someplace. I would imagine they're going to go to Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara. But the guy to go picking up after waivers and stashing is A.T. Perry, the 6th round pick out of Wake Forest. 84% snaps with Michael Thomas out, 4 for 2 for 38 and a touchdown. And again, higher efficiency usage and the touchdown. That's what I'm chasing more than the other snaps that are out there from a wide receiver 3 standpoint. But I still do think that Rashid Shaheed should get a slight bump in overall usage going forward. So again, you do you. If I thought there was a guy that had a road to having anything more than wide receiver 3 usage in this offense, with Michael Thomas out, I would go pick up that guy. But Olave is probably going to have the there's going to be as much of a likelihood that Chris Olave can move into the wide receiver 1 range with Michael Thomas's vacated targets as there is that one of these guys can be in that consistent wide receiver 3 range. I don't think it really changes the fantasy landscape too much. The defense is at Atlanta, so they are continue to be in that low end weekly usage range for the Saints. All right, the Seahawks. Geno Smith did hurt himself in this game. It was a bruise to what they said. It was an elbow bruise, and then they changed it and said it was a bruise to the tendon at the bottom of the triceps. He did not practice on Monday. He was 22-34, 233 in a tug. Kenneth Walker left early with an oblique. He is DNP doubtful. They still don't know if IR is on the table. They said they still have to monitor the injury. This might be something to monitor because if they IR him, they'll probably do it before game time. Not to say that I know one way or the other they're going to do that. So Zach Charbonnet should not be available in any competitive league. If he is, I would dump the boat on this. 85% snaps, 15 for 47, 6 for 6 for 22. Again, that usage could tell me that as long as Kenneth Walker's out, he's going to be in that RB1 range. Kenny McIntosh is going to come back, so I imagine that the overall usage for Charbonnet is going to be in that 70% range, and McIntosh is going to get the other 30. If I have Charbonnet going forward, I would be cuffing him with Kenny McIntosh. I could probably do that relatively cheap. DK Metcalf was at 71% snaps, 9 for 5 for 94 in a tug. So again, he's just going to be living in that wide receiver 2 range. I don't see that being changing anything. Let's see. I do want to talk about the wide receivers for the Seahawks. So Tyler Lockett was yesterday was limited with a hamstring. And the reason why I think this is of value is because JSN was at 68% snaps, 6 for 30 for 33. He actually outsnapped Tyler Lockett in this game, who was at 55% snaps. So Jake Bobo, he did leave with a shoulder at 35% snaps. So again, if there's a guy this week, depending on Tyler Lockett, if JSN is available in your league, you could definitely see that JSN is going to move into that wide receiver 2 role that Lockett has been occupying. So there's probably floor to ceiling, the best chance to win a week this week of a wide receiver if he's available on your wire, depending on Tyler Lockett's hamstring, would be JSN. And then I do have the defense for the playoffs, Tennessee and at home for Pittsburgh. So again, if I'm planning ahead and I can get through this stretch of San Francisco, Dallas, San Francisco again, Philadelphia, then I know if I can plan that far ahead for the semis and the championship, Seattle would be a very good matchup for those two teams. All right, moving on to the Steelers. So finally, Matt Canada was fired. I don't know how much this changes the offense. Kenny Pickett probably has been stunted his development with Matt Canada and this offense at this point. Kenny Pickett was 15 for 28, 106 in the loss to Cleveland. Najee was at 57% snaps, 12 for 35, 2 for 1 for 1. Jalen Warren, 45% snaps, 9 for 129, a touchdown. It was a 74-yard run, another 3 for 3 for 16. I imagine that they're still going to be splitting the backfield up. Jalen Warren probably has a higher ceiling, obviously. They're both going to be relatively touchdown dependent. I don't know how much that's going to change these two guys going forward, but they're both weekly roles in that like low-end RB2 range. George Pickens, and again, these numbers don't matter. He was at 91% snaps, 6 targets. Deontay Johnson, 86% snaps, 8 targets. Pat Freiermuth was back, 52% snaps. Again, if I'm tight end needy, that would be a guy that I'd be picking up. Muth has been a top 10 tight end before, and he may be flying under the radar. There is going to be a change in the Pittsburgh. It's going to be difficult to predict if it's going to be a good change or a bad change. I imagine it can't be any worse than Matt Canada was before. So sneakily picking up pieces is not a bad idea in the case of Pat Freiermuth. Overall, but I think my expectations are going to be this is not going to be a good offense. The defense is maybe a weekly role because of their schedule. So to pull them up as we get closer and closer to the end. So you got at Cincinnati with Jake Browning taking over for Joe Burrow. Arizona, probably not with Kyler Murray. Yes to the Patriots. Probably you can roll them against the Colts in the first round of playoffs. They got the Bengals again with Jake Browning. So that's something to monitor. This week, I would be rolling them out against the Bengals, seeing how the Bengals roll rest of the season. So you could have that matchup again in the semis. And then Seattle has been not good on offense necessarily. So there's a possibility that if I'm just rolling the Steelers out rest of the year, I could get away with it for the most part. All right, the Texans. CJ Stroud was 27 of 37, 336, 2 tugs, and 3 picks. I didn't even bother to go look at the tape on the picks, and my explanation is at this point, CJ Stroud is going to be a set and forget quarterback one. So if he throws interceptions, if he has fumbles, it's not going to change anything from a fantasy perspective. I'm rolling him out regardless because they are turning into a higher volume passing offense, and he's going to score me touchdowns. I have no news on Dameon Pierce. Devin Singletary, 85% snaps, 22, 112, a touchdown, 2 for 2 for 6. Congratulations. If he continues this, he's going to be flirting with low-end running back one numbers the rest of the way. Mike Boone was only at 13% snaps, 1 carry, 1 target. So again, if I'm the Devin Singletary owner, I'm hoping that Dameon Pierce takes as much time as possible coming back. And even when he does, if Devin Singletary keeps the sus up, I can imagine that you're going to be looking at something maybe along the line of a 50-50 split between Devin Singletary getting about 50% of the work and Dameon Pierce getting 30, and then Mike Boone staying in that 20 range, similar to how it was before the injury to Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce was only getting about 50% of the work, and then it was split up between Mike Boone and Devin Singletary. So I would imagine that would be the same going forward. Would move Devin Singletary down, but at that rate, if he can stay efficient in a good offense, it would keep him in that RB2 week-to-week range. Let's see. Nico Collins, 76% snaps, 11 targets, 7 receptions, 65 yards. Tank Dell, 76% snaps, 10 targets, 8 receptions, 149 yards, and a touchdown. Noah Brown was out. Before I talk about these two guys, Robert Woods was at 75% snaps, 8 targets, 5 receptions, 44 yards. Dalton Schultz was at 85% snaps, 3 for 2 for 32 and a touchdown. What does this mean? Well, Noah Brown's going to come back. They're likely going to be rolling in a lot of 3 wide receiver sets with Nico and Noah Brown on the outside, and then they can move these guys around interchangeably so they can get better deep shots with Tank Dell on the outside if they want to. Tank Dell operating in the slot. Tank Dell is probably going to have the most overall week-to-week value going forward because if he does operate more in the slot, he's going to have that slot floor with a lot of boom-bust appeal. But the hard thing outside of maybe Dalton Schultz, because he's a tight end, it's going to be harder and harder to predict who's going to have a league-winning week or a league weekly win. So it's going to be difficult to say, is this a Nico week? Is it a Noah Brown week? Is it a Tank Dell week? Outside of the fact that Tank Dell gets the majority of the slot snaps and he can keep that target share up. But otherwise, it's going to become very unpredictable. So good from a football standpoint, bad from a fantasy standpoint. So at that point, you might want to think about either rolling a guy and getting burned or not rolling a guy and getting burned. So that's going to be tough. The defense, I would say, is a priority pickup. I was looking at this earlier. I've been talking about them for a while. So the Houston going forward, Jacksonville is going to be unpredictable. I wouldn't be rolling him out week 12, but I would be picking him up this week because Denver at the Jets, again, that's Tim Boyle. At Tennessee, Will Levis, rookie quarterback. DTR, rookie quarterback for Cleveland in the semis, and then Tennessee again in the finals. So this would be somebody that I would be picking up that I could either roll weekly after week 12, or I could be streaming around somebody else if I don't like the matchups. All right, Titans. There was only 38 total offensive snaps. This is not going to be a good offense from a fantasy perspective. There just aren't enough snaps going forward to do anything. Will Levis, 13 for 17, 158, 2 tugs. Those were garbage time tugs. Fumble loss. Derrick Henry was up to 63% snaps, 10 for 38, 2 for 1 for 6. Probably going to remain in that mid to low end volume-based RB2 range. Tajay Spears, 45% snaps, 4 for 14, 2 for 2 for 12. And again, this all comes back to the fact that they were so bad for most of the game that there was only 38 offensive snaps. There are teams that do 38 offensive snaps in a half. This was over the course of a game. DeAndre Hopkins got home on a long touchdown, 63% snaps, 5 for 4 for 59 and tug. So I think he still can be rolled out with relative confidence in that wide receiver 2 range. Kyle Phillips, if you're into that type of thing, was at 35% snaps, 5 for 3 for 61. And again, they're going to have low snaps. He's going to have low opportunities. So even as a wide receiver 3 with Kyle Phillips, it's going to be difficult to know if there's going to be enough snaps to actually have him hit that relative wide receiver 3 threshold of about 5 targets. I don't even know if that's predictive. I don't have any news on Treylon Burks, but again, with this limited amount of snaps on a week-to-week basis, I don't think this supports anybody outside of just one guy, so I wouldn't even be like chasing Chig anymore. All right, finally, the Vikings. All right, Dobbs was 20 of 32, 221, a tug, 1 pick, another 8 for 21, a touchdown on the ground, 3 fumbles, 1 lost. He is a turnover machine, so any defense that plays the Vikings is a weekly role at this point just because of Josh Dobbs being the turnover machine that he is. He's also going to stay in that range of a low-end quarterback 1 to having the ability to have a weekly ceiling to compete against the elite guys going forward. All right, the backfield. Alexander Madison was at 65% snaps, 18 for 81, 2 for 1 for -1 through the air. He did have 5 overall red zone carries. Ty Chandler was at 31% snaps, 10 for 73, 4 for 4 for 37. All right, so what do I think this means? I can see that Ty Chandler is going to get an uptick in overall usage, but I could also see that this is just basically how the backfield distribution is going to be going forward. So it's going to be very difficult to guess who's going to get the opportunity and not, because this is a weird game script against the Denver. This is a team that doesn't necessarily want to run the football, and you're looking at a combined with Dobbs's scrambling, like 36 overall opportunities on the ground, which I don't think this team necessarily wants to do. They may have to do this with Josh Dobbs, but again, trying to guess Ty Chandler is going to have 7.3 yards per carry is going to be difficult. I can see that he's going to have a better overall week-to-week floor because of his use in the passing game. But if he doesn't get the red zone carries, and I already talked about this with Alexander Madison, I do think that Alexander Madison, being the bigger back, is always going to get more of the red zone carries. So this is a guy that has to basically score outside the 5-yard line. That's going to cap him overall, and I don't know how much more I'm going to, I'm going to see him getting an uptick in usage. I could definitely see that he's going to get the 30 to 40% snaps, and those plays are going to be designed to basically go to him. And I have written down my note, this is weird usage because of the script and the play calling. I could see it being, I could see Chandler getting a bump overall and taking Madison out of the backfield almost entirely. So it could go to 70-30 Ty Madison or Ty Chandler. But again, I could also see it staying here and then Ty Chandler being a very dicey week-to-week play. I don't have any Justin Jefferson news other than I saw a tweet that Justin Jefferson basically told everybody to shut up from a fantasy standpoint. He'll play when he's healthy. Remember, they have a week 13 bye, so I could definitely see that he won't be back until then. I just want to verify that I'm not wrong on that one. Questionable for week 12 per coach. So, again, I could definitely see that he's going to miss this week and week 12 and then be back at week 14. That would make the most sense to me going forward if he's a little bit questionable about his hamstring at this point. Addison was at 95% snap, 6 for 3 for 44. I could see that basically Addison is a wide receiver 3 going forward. There may not be enough targets going forward. Dobbs targets tight ends at one of the highest rates in the league. So, even when Justin Jefferson comes back, this is going to downgrade Addison. Already with TJ Hawkinson, 7 targets this last game. Ty Chandler getting 4 targets. I would almost say that Jordan Addison is that in that wide receiver 3. I wouldn't even say boom bust. He's just a wide receiver 3 going forward for the rest of the year. And the defense is a maybe with their schedule. Aiden O'Connell, week 14. Justin Fields is a turnover machine and a sack machine, week 12. Week 15, Jake Browning. Week 16, Detroit. I wouldn't be rolling him out then, but week 17 in the finals against Jordan Love was something you could think about. And then finally, to finish this off, trying to predict quarterbacks. So we had Santos from Chicago. I could actually think about pulling this up. Kyrie Santos for Chicago. Will Lutz, Denver. So that was at Minnesota. Chicago played Detroit. So that's a game that we were expecting not to have or to be higher scoring. Even though Detroit's supposed to have a good offense. So that's probably predictable. Will Lutz, Denver, not overly predictable. Tyler Bass at Buffalo, good offense against good defense, sort of predictable. They're not going to be able to convert touchdowns. They're going to get field goals. Jason Myers, Seattle against the Rams. I don't think that's predictable. Okay offense against okay defense, maybe we could say that. Justin Tucker, Baltimore, just a good offense. Brandon McManus, and once you get past about 10 points, they're probably not winning you anything from a kicker standpoint. Anyway, so to recap, let's see, roster your cuffs, and anybody else's. Pick up two defenses. Guys like Michael Wilson, Jamison Williams, Jaden Reed, Jonathan Mingo, A.T. Perry, JSN, all are going to be in that wide receiver 3 range with the ability to be boom bust and potentially even win you your week this week. With the Jamison Williams, Jaden Reed's probably a priority on the waiver wires. Jamison Williams is probably a guy that you could try and get ahead of the dragon and roll out this week. Jonathan Mingo is a stash, but you could get a little sneaky with him. A.T. Perry is probably more of a stash. Michael Wilson may be a stash or even a weekly play right now. JSN, depending on Lockett's hamstring. Zach Charbonnet is you'll sell the farm to get. Justin Watson, I have written down from last night. He's another guy that I could probably be stashing or rolling him in my lineup this week as a wide receiver 3. Isaiah Likely's another guy, the tight end for the Ravens, who's more of a priority pickup. AJ Dillon, if he's available. Tutu Atwell, if Cooper Kupp is going to miss some time. Yeah, that's about all I got. So hopefully this helps some guys out.